Hello, my name is Mr. Max. You can just call me Max, please don't call me anything else. And welcome to a Dead by Daylight chapter concept video. I've made many a Dead by Daylight chapter concepts over my life, over DBD's life, and this is the first time I'm deciding to actually share one of them. Uh, Obviously, the Dead by Daylight chapter is going to be being shown off for the first time as I am recording this, uh, technically, like 2 days and like 7 hours or so. So, I wanted to go ahead and, before anything certain comes out, show off what I personally uh, thought of when I thought of a Dead by Daylight chapter. This isn't necessarily what I want or what I expect. This is just what my mind thought of. And I figure might as well show it off, show off what I would, have done given the power to make this. So I'm going to be going over the killer, including the ability, the add-ons. You can don't worry, as you can tell by looking at the timeline of this video, everything is chaptered. You can skip it if you're not interested. The perks, uh, and then the costumes. I'll also be showing off the survivor's perks, and the survivor's costumes. And then going over just very vaguely what I think a map should look like for Dead by Daylight X FNAF. Uh, I'm very excited for the FNAF chapter. I'm super, super excited. Uh, Despite not even being a major FNAF fan, it just seems like it's going to be really awesome. So I hope you're ready for my chapter concept. A chapter I'm titling Remnant of Hate. And yes, I am very proud of myself for that. Unsurprisingly, I believe that the killer should be the attraction. Originally, I was going to call it the animatronic, but, well, as you'll see when I go over the power, that wouldn't have worked out very well. So instead, it's the attraction. I think the map should be Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. I'll get into that later. I think his attack should be animatronic claws, not a fire axe or a knife or biting or something. And I think his power should be called Springtrapped. Though, before I go further, I would like to shout out, firstly, NSPG Certified, who did an amazing FNAF X DBD power concept. Though I will state that it was very poorly timed, because the same day that I was putting together my power concept was when this was uploaded. And I'm going to be honest, our power concepts, while definitely different, are very similar. So just to prevent anyone saying I stole it, it was uploaded at 5:18 p.m. on the 3rd. I'd already begun working on this on 8:17 a.m. that same day, and as you can see, I'd already planned for there to be special locomotion and for there to be animatronics, both as props around the map and as enemies that can be activated. So not ripped off from his, although his was very interesting and very good. That out of the way. Let's go ahead and talk about the basics of what I wanted to do here. I wanted to avoid using phantoms and cameras with this character. One, because it's not certain if he actually controls the phantoms or not, and I just think it would make more sense to focus on him personally. And as for the cameras, audio has always been more important to Springtrap. Audio lures and things like that. He doesn't generally have a ton of camera mechanics. I didn't list it here, but vents I also don't want to be used because, let's face it, trying to work vents into a Springtrap power in a way that isn't dumb or overpowered or weird is kind of difficult. I also wanted him to be simple, but not too basic, so I'm not looking for something as complex as Singularity or as simple as Trapper, but I am looking for something kind of like the Unknown, where it's a very easy power to wrap your head around, even though it's got some moving parts to it, you know. It's got a passive, it's got something you're actively doing, you know, it's got explicit survivor counterplay, and I think that's just sort of perfect for this. Less complicated than the Unknown, I will admit, but still, the Unknown was kind of a baseline for as complex as this should get. I also knew that jump scares had to be essential. I heard somebody say that maybe it should just be the Mori, but personally, I think if you're doing FNAF, you gotta go all the way. So I think jump scares should be essential to the power. And as I already mentioned, the audio is going to be the most important way of counterplay. This doesn't mean that cameras aren't going to be involved in this chapter. I'll tell you right now, one of the Survivor perks is camera related. I just think that it shouldn't be built into the character itself, because I think it could get too complicated and also wouldn't be as flavorful as basing everything around audio. Because Springtrap's responses to audio are very special when it comes to the game, when it comes to the games, and when it comes to Dead by Daylight, there's already a robust audio system that can be made very useful when it comes to this killer. So let's talk about the power I came up with to fit into this. Springtrapped. It looks like a lot, but this is just because this is the extensive breakdown, okay? Basically, the main thing is that you're going to have a movement ability, and you're going to be able to stuff survivors into animatronics, and audio is going to be able to both help and hinder you. Those are just the very, very basics. Alright? So, special ability Springtrapped. Every time a loud noise notification occurs within the attraction's terror radius, and I think it should probably be base terror radius, base speed, total spring lock failure is not on cooldown. The attraction gains a token up to a total of 5. When the attraction reaches 5 tokens, total spring lock failure triggers in the direction of the loud noise notification that gave him his 5th token. And I've already mentioned that that is special locomotion. It's a movement ability. So basically, you will automatically rush in the direction of that loud noise notification. It's a very strong form of counterplay, but in and of itself is also dangerous. Not in the least, because whenever the attraction gains a token, he gains 10% haste for 2 seconds. So you might be trying to save a survivor who's being chased, but if you do that, he might just instantly catch up. You've got to be careful when you use that, just like how in the games you can't overuse your audio lures, otherwise you're going to have a bad time. Alright, but let's get into total spring lock failure, the locomotion ability. Pressing the power button while this ability is off of cooldown will cause the attraction to charge forward, loudly screaming. It'd be a moderate distance, longer than a Wesker dash, shorter than a maximum nurse TP. And then he lets out an even louder scream at the end. Alright, and survivors within the terror radius of the attraction, when he stops charging and screams, get jump scared and are then revealed by killer instinct for 3 seconds. And survivors touched by the attraction as he charges forward are affected by 5% hindered and are revealed by killer instinct for 5 seconds. This doesn't damage. He's not a traditional dash killer. This is a information ability, which, if used on someone, can give them hindered. But primarily it is for movement and for information, with, if you land it directly on somebody, a bit of a movement speed debuff. But it is not primarily for damage, because at the end of the day, Springtrap doesn't really do the sort of crazy stuff that other killers or other animatronics in the FNAF universe does. You know, his original jump scare, he just pokes his head on in and says hi. You know, he's more chill. him running around in pain, from the spring locks. I think that's really cool, but I don't think it should be like him lunging at you in order to kill you. I just don't think that really fits. And I think this is a very good way to have him have a lot of map presence and also be able to actually be valuable as a M1 killer, especially when combined with the haste he's getting. It can be very nasty, especially since this could just be used for the movement to run up to somebody who's trying to escape and hit them. I think it has potential to be really very useful. And even more useful will be the special prop inactive animatronics. A total of 4 inactive animatronics are placed throughout the environment. 1 Freddy, 1 Chica, 1 Bonnie, and 1 Foxy. This almost doesn't matter. These can be interacted with by both the attraction and survivors. The attraction can see the auras of all inactive animatronics and ruined animatronics. We'll get into what ruined animatronics are. Survivors have access to the ability to activate animatronics. They can perform the activate animatronic action on inactive animatronics. It'll take 20 seconds, and once the action is completed, the animatronic will become active, but not as an enemy. That's very important. And it will begin patrolling a large radius around where it was activated. And while patrolling, it will rush towards the attraction if he comes within their line of sight, and it will jump at him. The jump can go over drop pallets and windows, but it can be dodged. Alright, if you're fast enough, you can absolutely dodge it. After missing a jump, the active animatronic will be stunned for 3 seconds, and if during that time it's hit by the attraction's animatronic claws, they will become inactive again. Also, I do think it should be stated that also he should be able to hit them even when they're not stunned, so long as he wasn't hit, caught by them. I think he should be able to sneak up on them if he's out of their line of sight and still hit them. I just didn't write that down. Now, if an active animatronic successfully jumps onto the attraction, he will have to fight them off for 3 whole seconds, and the animatronic will become ruined. Ruined animatronics cannot have survivors stuffed into them, we'll get into that, and cannot be activated by survivors, so they're off the field for both the killer and the survivors. Alright, ruined animatronics become inactive animatronics when a generator is fully repaired, and the attraction cannot see the aura of animatronics that have been activated by survivors. So that means he can absolutely get jumped by them. And it also, the whole generator thing, it means that survivors might need to be careful and even delay activating generators to avoid letting the attraction get his hands on a really well-placed animatronic. It's a very, it's a lot of counterplay there. And I think this also works out very well lore-wise because the animatronics don't like Springtrap. If they ever do something for him, it's out of fear. So if the survivors get to them, they can use them against Springtrap, and I love that idea. But of course, Springtrap is very good at making use of the animatronics himself. While carrying a downed survivor and standing next to an inactive animatronic, the attraction can perform the Stuff Survivor action to stuff the survivor into the animatronic, turning it into an activated animatronic enemy. While stuffed, the survivor will slowly make hook progression as normal. That is the killer's special interaction. Alright? This special enemy, the activated animatronics, alright, they work like this. They patrol a large radius around where they were activated, just like when activated by survivors. And while patrolling, they will rush towards survivors that come into their line of sight and jump at them, just like they did when survivors activated, except this time against survivors instead of against the attraction. Alright. They also, when like this, will begin patrolling towards loud noise notifications made within their patrol radius, though they won't immediately rush towards them. They'll just sort of be distracted and begin meandering in that direction. They'll still look around and patrol a little, but they'll generally move in that direction. Their jump can go over drop pallets and windows, just like when activated by survivors. And after missing a jump, an active animatronic gets stunned for 5 seconds, during which time a survivor can perform the free stuff survivor action on it. If an active animatronic successfully jumps on a survivor, the survivor will be injured, pinned, and forced to make multiple skill checks in order to free themselves. Stunning the active animatronic for 10 seconds once they freed themselves. During that time, survivor can also perform the free stuff survivor action. When a survivor is put into the dying state within 16 meters of an activated animatronic enemy, the activated animatronic enemy will approach them and pick them up unless the attraction hits them. Literally, once again, like I said, fear is how the attraction does things. It's how Springtrap does things. So you don't like what they're doing, just like Nemesis can punch his zombies, you can punch them, alright, and it'll make them not go after the survivor. Alright? But if he doesn't do that, it will begin carrying them towards the nearest inactive animatronic. If you hit them while it's carrying a survivor, it'll go towards the nearest hook instead. So you can basically have that extra map control because you don't have to take the survivors to the hook or to the animatronic yourself. The grip is easier to break out of when it's an activated animatronics, but the attraction can see the aura of activated animatronic enemies. He'll know if you've broken out. He'll know where you broke out. So it's definitely something that can be used, but also you'd have to be careful about using it. I also think this would be very useful for new killer players, since it would make their lives a little bit easier being able to just, have one of the animatronics do something for them while they go out hunting instead of it all being on them. I think it would be nice for a new killer player. Alright, then when it comes to freeing a penned survivor, non-penned survivors can free them. They can increase the rate at which a penned survivor frees themselves. They can't actually break them free entirely themselves. So if a penned survivor's just given up, you're kind of screwed. Then there's special interaction freeing a stuffed survivor. While a survivor is performing the free stuffed survivor action, the activated animatronic enemy being affected will remain stunned. If the action is stopped before it is done, the active animatronic enemy will remain stunned for the rest of the normal duration. So if you were 5 seconds into the stun and began repairing, once you stop and then began freeing the stuffed survivor but then run away, once you stop freeing them, the 5 seconds you had left in that cooldown will continue on, and then it will become functional like normal. And while you are freeing a stuffed survivor, multiple skill checks will happen for you. You do not want a survivor to get stuffed. It is a bad time. Alright? When the free stuff survivor action is successfully completed, the active animatronic enemy will become a ruined animatronic, and the survivor that is stuffed will be freed and in the injured state. Ruined animatronics can't have survivors stuffed into them, all of that, same as usual. They get repaired when a generator is fully repaired. This is the power. I think it's a very good hybrid of a passive ability alongside a dash which doesn't do damage and some good information. I think it's a good hybrid of a lot of things, and it would be very easy to get into for a new killer player. And I think it has potential, not be an A tier, but maybe like a B tier or high C tier character. I think that this definitely has potential. It definitely would have issues, but I think that a lot of the big issues you'd worry about with enemies on the field, like camping and 3-genning, are sort of solved by the fact that they are limited in their area and that they can be dodged and stuff like that. At the end of the day, I think that this is a very solid killer concept, and I would be very happy to see this in Dead by Daylight. Hell, I might even become a Springtrap main if that was the way it is. As far as the add-ons go, note that these are very basic, just me spitballing things, not very deeply thought of. But as far as add-ons go, Here's what I think. I think for your brown common add-ons, uh, you should have the hand crank, which could increase the attraction's power, so it can have a maximum of 6 tokens rather than 5. Just make it a little bit harder for survivors to mess with you. Very useful. I think that there should be a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria ad as a common uh, add-on, and I think that should allow you to see the auras of activated animatronics that were activated by survivors. Just make your life a lot easier, less chance for you to get jump scared. Then I think we should have a missing persons poster, which could make it so the attraction will travel slightly farther when willingly using total spring lock failure. So, a survivor can't take advantage of this in order to pull you really far away from where you want to be. It sort of only works for you, doesn't work for them. I think that would be very nice. Then I think there also could be a nameplate. Uh, Add-on, which could increase the range at which the attraction's scream affects survivors slightly. So, right now it's in the terror radius. It could probably be like extra 6 meters or something, maybe 4 meters extra. Just something to really help. Make sure you get even more information, you're catching even more people, scaring even more people off. That's the thing, the jump scare in and of itself is also something that could be very useful, because you're gonna be scared by it. That's the way jump scares work. If it's a good jump scare, you're probably gonna be jumping even if you know you're not in danger at the moment. I think that could definitely catch a lot of survivors off guard and have them all shaken up. I think that's an aspect of it, of the power I came up with. You gotta keep in mind. Endoskeleton parts. I think this should be our first uncommon. Why is it green? I don't know. They changed the rarity system, so I'm working with that. Honestly, I hope they change it back. Uh, I think endoskeleton parts works very well. Activated animatronics enemies' grips are harder to break out, or as hard to break out of as the attraction. So take that downside of using them off of the table. Just give them a little bit of extra grip. I think that'd be very useful. And also, I wasn't even thinking about this, but depending on how you chose to code this or interpret this, you could also make it so things like iron grip affect this. That wasn't my intention, but it could be interpreted that way, and I don't know, that might be pretty nice. Freddy plushie, I think, could be another add-on. Survivors gain the 3% hindered status effect when within 10 meters of an activated animatronic enemy. So just, you don't want to even be close to them. It'll begin, it's sort of the idea is that you're being lured into a false sense of security because, oh, it's Freddy Fazbear. Oh, that's so cute. And then it gets you. That's kind of the idea I was going for there. Bloody knife. I mean, come on. Survivors who are freed from being pinned by activated animatronic enemies gain the exposed status effect for 15 seconds afterwards. So, it's not enough to escape. You then have to make sure you escape again, because Springtrap will be beelining it for you to try and get you down. Alright? It might be like, well, they're already injured, but you know how fast you can be healed in this game sometimes. This might not get a ton of use, but I think it could be useful. If not, having it be like hemorrhage or something like that could also work. Fredbear's Family Diner ad. Stuffing survivors into inactive animatronics is 50% faster. Just, really shove them in there. Animatronic schematic. After missing a jump, activated animatronic enemies remain stunned for 1 second less. Afton, he's the one who came up with this. He'd be able to jury rig it so that way it's not quite as easy to deal with them. I think that could be very useful. I hate the blue rarity so much. Assorted spring locks would be our first of the rare add-ons. Survivors suffer from the mangled and hemorrhage status effects for 20 seconds after being freed from an animatronic. So, just make it even more hellish after you've gotten out of them. Really, you don't want to be stuffed. Burned horror attraction ad. Generators within range of the attraction's scream will explode if the survivor is working on them and begin regressing. If the survivor is not working on a generator within range, it simply begins regressing. So, some free regression, from afar, very useful, very annoying. Survivors are going to have to fight against that hard. Illusion Disc. I like this one a lot. It's very simple. Survivors within the attraction's terror radius will occasionally see hallucinations of the attraction. People will be shitting their pants. Like, especially because this isn't Doctor. Doctor, you're used to it. The attraction, probably half the games you play minimum, you're not seeing this. When you do see this, it is going to make you shit yourself. I love the idea of that. It's such a useless add-on, but it would be so fun. You'd get such funny reactions out of it. Next, we have Business Contract. The obsession is revealed when within 8 meters of an animatronic. Activated animatronics are revealed within 16 meters of the obsession. Survivors who are not the obsession gain the 3% hindered status effect when within range of Springtrap's scream. So basically, the way this is saying, note how it doesn't say activated animatronic enemies. This is saying that if the obsession is near one of the allied animatronics, that baby is going to be revealed. So you can't be hoping to catch him off guard, and if you're too close, you're going to be revealed. This is very nasty. It's sort of, Afton, not a big fan of Henry Emily, his business partner. He's going for him. He's obsessed, I really like that idea. Next, the Remnant Collection System, or you could call it the SCUP. Scoop, I hate that so much. Thing, if you wanted. Basically, the idea is just that animatronics that were not destroyed after pinning a survivor gain the 5% haste status effect until they are ruined or made inactive. So, if Springtrap is able to down a survivor who's being pinned instead of them breaking free, that animatronic will get a buff, and that can just keep stacking. You could get that up absurdly fast. This thing could be zipping around. Like, could it probably break the game? Yes. Would you have to be working with the survivors in order to make that happen? Absolutely. But it could happen. Alright, our first very rare add-on is going to be Vial of Remnant. The attraction can perform the Harvest Remnant interaction on inactive animatronics. This takes 5 seconds. After this interaction is completed, the attraction gains the 5% haste and undetectable status effects for 10 seconds. So, you spend 5 seconds gathering it. Afterwards, you got 10 seconds of extra haste, and you're undetectable. Also, when it comes to the hindered and haste, I know that hindered and haste, or at least haste, got a buff recently, so these may need to change to be in line with that buff. I don't know. Fredbear Plush. When an activated animatronic enemy is unobserved and within 24 meters of a survivor opening a locker, they will teleport into the locker and jump out of it. Freeing yourself after being pinned like this is 50% faster. This is just, once again, this is going to be pissing, there's going to be people pissing themselves. They're going to be terrified of lockers. Alright, like, you get out of 50% faster, but, like, Springtrap is going to be able to use this very well. The next one. I'm very happy with the next one. Medical Files. A 5th inactive animatronic is placed in the environment, this being Golden Freddy. When activated, the animatronic teleports from generator to generator every 15 seconds at random instead of patrolling normally. Survivors who look at this activated animatronic for longer than 5 seconds total will be put into the dying state and be revealed by Killer Instinct for 3 seconds. Like, you cannot look at this thing. Run away. If the attraction looks at this animatronic for longer than 5 seconds total after a survivor is activated, he'll be stunned for 3 seconds. So, this just, you've got to keep thinking about it the entire time, because this is total. This is not in a row. It's 5 seconds total. you are screwed if you've looked at this thing too long. No matter who you are, the killer's going to be stunned for 3 seconds. It's going to be, you're going to be having a very bad time as the attraction if you get hit by that. But if you're hitting the survivors, man, you're going to love it. For secret files, I think the ability should be when they are activated. I forgot a comma. When they are activated, active animatronic enemies. Yeah, oh no, I got this right. Sorry, my bad. When they are activated animatronic enemies, Foxy moves 15% faster, Bonnie is 50% quieter, Chica destroys pallets and blocks windows when she jumps over them, and Freddy instantly puts any survivor he jumps on into the dying state. Um, might this be a little OP? Maybe. Do I think it's awesome? Absolutely. Give them all something special. For ultra rares, we're going to have two of them. One is the Afton family photo. When within 32 meters of an activated animatronic enemy, survivors cannot hear the attraction's terror radius. When a survivor is within the attraction's terror radius and is within 32 meters of an activated animatronic enemy, they gain the 5% hindered status effect. For every activated animatronic enemy, the attraction moves 5% faster when within 32 meters of an activated animatronic enemy. However, his general speed is reduced to 110% as opposed to 115%, which is what killers normally are at. Basically, the idea with this is, love of family. The animatronics are, sort of working for him. They're kind of like family to him, And, for all the ones he's getting activated, he's getting a buff whenever he is near a single activated animatronic. You have all 4 or all 5 up. Even if you're only within 32 meters of one of them, you've got plus 25% speed. You've got to deal with this. As survivors, you cannot let this happen. And you've got to be really careful when you are near activated animatronics, because you are going to be having a very bad time if he's able to sneak up on you. Because this also is a very good stealth perk, letting him sneak up on you because you won't hear his terror radius. I love this, I say perk, I love this add-on. I love this add-on. It might need more of a drawback, but I really, really like this add-on. I think it's very good. Next, the Iridescent Spring Bonnie Mask. This one isn't crazy, but I still like it. While opening a locker while his power is available, the attraction may press the active ability button to become invisible and undetectable. This will last until he uses total spring lock failure. The attraction cannot use his animatronic claws while invisible as a result of this add-on. While not invisible, the attraction moves at 110% speed instead of 115% speed. So you kind of, once again, leaning into the stealth side, you can just, whenever you want, make yourself invisible and then dash out of that invisibility right into the middle of survivors. I don't think it's too crazy powerful, but I do think this absolutely, while a bit situational, could be very, very nice. Okay, let's move on to the perks. We have Hex, I Always Come Back. Having something with I Always Come Back is kind of a necessity for a Springtrap perk, but when thinking about it, I was like, it just doesn't make sense for Springtrap himself to be affected by it. So, we've got Undying 2 Electric Boogaloo, baby. Yeah! Every 120, 90, or 60 seconds, all snuff totems return, and any cleansed hex perks are reactivated on random non-booned totems, reset to exactly how they were when the trial first started. So if it's got a bunch of tokens and they go down throughout the trial, it'll have max tokens again. If it starts with 0, it'll have 0 again. Alright, and this only works for ones that were already cleansed, just to be clear. Alright, if a totem's been rekindled, this will still affect it, but it won't affect blessed totems. So Pentimento isn't going to work very well with this. If this Hex Totem is being cleansed when the timer ends, this perk does not activate until the cleansing is stopped, and if this totem is successfully cleansed while the activation is paused, the effect will not trigger unless Hex Undying is active and not also being cleansed. If this hex ever changes totems for any reason, i.e. Hex Undying is used to save it, the timer will be paused for 60, 45, or 30 seconds. Uh, as you can tell, I had to try very hard to make this and Hex Undying not absolutely overpowered together. As it stands, I think this works as a very good equal and opposite to Undying. Used together, they'd be really powerful, but there's very much a counter there. You know, you can absolutely counter them. I think Undying is more likely to give you value, but if you do get value from this, it will be a greater amount of value. That's my personal take for what this does and what it brings to the table. I'm very proud of this perk. I think it's a very interesting idea that I'd love to see in the game. Next, we have Mechanical Expert playing into William Afton's, designing of animatronics and stuff. The first part of this perk is something I actually thought of as a really interesting thing. It's not nearly good enough to be a perk on its own, but I absolutely love it. When a generator is fully repaired, any map changes that would occur as a result of its repair are delayed by 10, 20, or 30 seconds. So you know how sometimes you turn a generator on and a door will open? It'll take an extra 30 seconds for that door to actually begin opening. I think that's very useful. A lot of survivors rely on quickly popping generators in order to escape through a new route. They won't be able to do that with this. I think it'll catch a lot of people off guard when it's used. And also, survivors repairing a generator that the user has damaged within the past 20, 30, or 40 seconds will suffer a 15, 20, and 25% reduction to their repair speed until that amount of time has passed. There's no limits to how many generators can be affected by this perk. I know this seems really powerful, but you have to remember, toolboxes are very common, and they already give a big boost. At the end of the day, this is just slowing down repair speed, and it's only on generators that were damaged in the past 40 seconds. So you've got to go around kicking a bunch of generators to really get this going. When you've got the 3-gen up, this is going to be nasty, but it's still, at the end of the day, there's only so many times you can kick generator, there's only so much it can regress, and at the end of the day, you still are repairing it. It's just not as fast. I think this is fine. It could be nerfed if it is too powerful. Originally, I thought maybe it should only work on toolboxes, but I was like, I don't like that. It focuses too much on just toolboxes. I think this has a lot of potential as a perk. It might need to be adjusted, but I like the idea, at least in general. Finally, we have Manipulator. This is the most convoluted and weird one of all of these, but I also think I like this one the most. Afton is viewed as this master manipulator of sorts, with how he is able to keep getting into places and keep getting people to follow him, and I think this plays into it. The effect itself doesn't really seem that way, but when you think about the lore implications of what this effect means for the killer, I think that it's very interesting. So just hear me out on this, okay? When a survivor can see the user and is moving towards them, they gain the 5% haste status effect, but there's no indication of it. After the survivor looks away from the user, this effect disappears and they gain the 5% hindered status effect for 5 seconds, but once again, no indication of it. Once this effect ends, the survivor cannot be affected by this effect again for 60, 45, or 30 seconds. This can happen even when the perk is on cooldown. Okay, basically the idea with this is that he's sort of got an attraction to him. People want to move towards him. They don't like going away from him. It's also really useful because that 5% speed, it's not going to be telling you you've got it, so you might not even notice it, but you could wind up overshooting something. You could wind up running right into him when you meant to stop a little earlier, or that 5% hindered, you might not make it to that window you thought you were going to. I think it's a really useful, sneaky perk. But then you get to the real meat and potatoes of it. When the user loses sight of a survivor who they could see, kind of redundant, but you kind of get it, that was within their terror radius, and that they were not in chase with. This perk activates for 5, 10, 15 seconds. Alright, so you've got to see them, then lose sight of them. They have to be in your terror radius, and you have to not be in chase with them. Lots of requirements in order to activate it. But while active, if the survivor who activated this perk moves within 8, 12, or 16 meters of the user gains the 5% haste status effect for 5 seconds, and this perk goes on cooldown for 75, 60, or 45 seconds. With the way haste perks are right now, 10 or 15% haste might be better for this, but the whole idea is you go out of sight of them, you lose sight of them, but if they come near you, you're going to know they've come near you, and you're going to get a haste boost, so that way you can run right out and jump on them. It's how he would lead people away. He would break sight with them, he'd hide a little, they'd come looking, and bam, he'd hit them. It's sort of how he is known for doing things. He's sneaky. And I like this whole idea, kind of, the way the perk works. It kind of implies that the killer, you, the player, might not know, but the killer themselves does know where they are, and is actually planning all of this in advance, and you are just sort of playing out their actions despite not knowing what they were thinking of. I really like that as a concept, kind of like the killer is a character of their own who knows more than you. I really like that a lot. Last but not least, we have outfits. Beginning with the default, which I called the Monster's Tomb. The discolored remains of a Springlock animatronic with the remains of a killer inside. It's fitting that his favorite disguise is now his tomb. This would just be basic Springtrap, nothing special. The Springlock animatronic that serves as a killer's tomb is now covered in blood and viscera, attesting to his immortal rage for the monster's bloody tomb. This covered in gore, just drenched in it. It's Dead by Daylight. You can go all out. You can have him covered in entrails and blood. You can do that. So do it. Ultra rare should be Spring Bonnie, a Springlock costume used by Fredbear's Family Diner. It looks like a nice yellow rabbit, but inside a monster lurks, hiding in plain sight. This could even be like the movie's Yellow Rabbit, but I'd prefer it to be more game accurate. Then you have, because you have to have it, hopefully with a redesign, Scrap Trap. Burnt and ruined, this is all that remains of Springtrap, and despite that, he is enjoying eternity. He may be scrap, but you are still his prey. I had fun with the descriptions of these. Just wait till you see the survivors' descriptions for their costumes. But who is the survivor? Dun dun dun! It is Michael Afton, the prodigal son. This is pretty much one of the only images we have of him. Woo! Kind of reminds me of something, but sorry, I don't know. So Michael Afton, yeah, he'd be the survivor, the prodigal son. Woo! Never gonna, sorry, Remnant of Hate, Prodigal Son, Scooped. That's the name of his first perk that he's bringing to the table. When the user enters the dying state as a result of taking a protection hit, their recovery speed is increased by 10, 20, or 30%, and they become able to fully recover by themselves. After the user picks himself up, they become exhausted for 60, 45, 30 seconds, and the user is unable to bleed. However, when taking a protection hit, the user does not gain increased movement speed. So basically, this is an altruism perk, which can in many ways function as an anti-tunnel perk, meant to be used offensively, instead of an anti-tunnel perk, which is exclusively used offensively, despite being meant to be used defensively. I like this a lot, it explicitly rewards you taking body blocks. It rewards you for taking body blocks, it gives you a boost, and it punishes the killer if they're going after their original target. It encourages them to go for you and hook you, let you take the brunt of it. But it also, if you do pick yourself up, you've got that exhaustion, so the killer is still able to potentially catch up to you, and you aren't gaining the increased movement speed. So, it's got upsides and downsides. This might need to be adjusted a little, but I think it would be very, very neat. I think this could be very useful, and I don't think it would be overpowered by any means. Next, though, is another day on the job. This was originally 2 perks, but I decided I wanted to have a camera perk, so I made them both into one, and honestly, I think it's fine. Neither of them are exactly too powerful. The perk begins with 1, 2, or 3 tokens. The perk begins the trial deactivated. When in the killer's terror radius, that is when the perk activates. When using a flashlight while this perk is active, the user is unable to move, but the beam is 10, 15, or 20% wider and easier to control. As in an extra 20% easier to control, you know? Extra 10, 15, 20% easier to control. Additionally, the killer gains the hindered status effect while the beam is in their eyes, which increases in severity until they are blinded and become stunned. So it kind of plays into the idea in Five Nights at Freddy's that, you know, the flashlight is stopping them in place. You know, in this case, it is immediately you're going to be suffering the consequences, but, you're stuck in place as well as the survivor. Even if you're stopping the killer in place, you're giving up valuable distance. So you kind of got to weigh the effects, weigh the costs and the benefits. Then here's the real great part of this that I'm very proud of. When this perk is active, the user may press the active ability button to put on a mask, which consumes a token and makes a sound cue that the killer can hear. You know, that zip one from Five Nights at Freddy's 2. When the user does this, they become unable to move and also become invisible for up to 5, 10, or 15 seconds, or until they press the active ability button again to take the mask off, are injured, or are put into the dying state. So this, you put the mask on, the, animatronics aren't, they don't register you as a threat, so this is kind of like this. And I like this because it is a stealth perk, but it tells the killer you're using it. It doesn't do anything about blood or scratch marks or breathing. Alright? And it locks you in place. And you can still be injured, you can still be put into the dying state, so you can't really just rely on this. The killer can absolutely counter this. Will it be the most fun thing? No, but really this is a very good way to get out of a chase, or to, when doing something, like working on a generator or something, hide and hope the killer goes away. It honestly would be quite situational, rather than, just use it whenever the killer's coming after me and I'll be fine. I think this would be a very good way to do a stealth perk. I really like it. And it's only got 3 uses, and you have to, as the user, decide when you want to use it. I really like that, and it's bringing in the gameplay kind of Five Nights at Freddy's to the survivor side of things, and I'm a big fan of that. Invocation, Observed Monsters. Yes, it's a terrible name, but all invocations have, thus far, all 2 of them, been named adjective or verb, and then the name of an animal. So, I'm already stretching it, making it monsters, and not killers or evildoers or something. Like, give me a break. I'm trying to make this seem like an actual perk that could happen, okay? So, it's an invocation, works exactly like an invocation. Once the invocation is complete, all survivors gain the ability to, on a 60, 45, or 30-second cooldown, press the active ability button when standing next to a generator. Doing so locks them in place and gives them a 360-degree view of the killer that they can control by moving their mouse around. While doing this, the survivor is revealed by killer instinct and becomes exposed. This view can be exited by pressing MB2. Once per trial, each survivor can press MB1 while doing this to blind the killer for 1, 2, or 3 seconds, stunning them for the duration, muffling all sounds to them, and erasing all scratch marks made during that period of time. So this is, it's kind of like you've got the flashes that you can use on the camera sometime. This is, you are making a sacrifice yourself, giving cameras to everybody so they can see the killer, but the killer knows where they are. And if you play this wrong, killer could be in a very bad position for you and immediately smack you before you're able to press MB2. it's that Five Nights at Freddy's thing. You're on your cameras if you're doing it at the wrong time, if you're not careful. The animatronics, they know where you are. In this case, the killer knows where you are, and they can instantly get you if you mess up, especially if you're the one who's broken as a result of doing this invocation. All right, because remember, when you do an invocation, you get the broken status effect. I don't know why it's not stated here. I'm fairly certain that is something that all invocations do. I swear to God it is. If not, then this gives you the broken stats effect if you're the one who completes it. Okay? Because the whole idea is, you want to play FNAF, you're playing FNAF. You've got one shot. You mess up, you're going down, just like in FNAF, and I'm very happy with that. I think that's a very good idea, and I like the idea that it's all survivors are able to use the cameras. You don't have to worry about placing the cameras or things like that. Just where you can see the killer's perspective. And if you have good map knowledge, you know where he is, you know where he's going, and if you see him chasing someone, you can stun him, you can mess with him. All right, I think it's a very fair perk. And the killer's going to know you're doing it because of the killer instinct. So like, the killer has ways to counterplay this. I think it would be a nice game of cat and mouse style thing, just like, in Five Nights at Freddy's. You've got to be careful using your cameras. They're very useful, but they can also screw you. And the same in this case. You've got to manage your resources, and the killer can absolutely outsmart you. I'm so happy with this invocation. I think this is probably one of, if not the best way that you could do cameras for a Five Nights at Freddy's chapter, personally. Alright, outfits wise, we're beginning with security guard uniform, nice and simple. A Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria trademark security guard uniform with some strange grime and tears on it. Oh, I think that meant tears. Works either way is the funny thing. Just Michael Afton gonna be in security guard uniform, nice and simple. Maybe with a Mike Schmidt tag. We've got our security guard uniform, Mike Schmidt. Michael Afton. Makes nice sense. Makes perfect sense. Then bloody security guard uniform for the prestige. A Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria trademark security guard uniform that is absolutely drenched in blood and a strange glowing goo. Remnant. It's Remnant. Get it? Fun references. I think this could be very fun. I think this could be very fun. You could do a lot potentially with this prestige. Then, the unforgotten sin. He wore a foxy mask when he did it. He will never forget that day. He will never forget what he did. He wears the striped shirt and jeans again, and he weeps. He weeps like his brother. Rest in peace! Sorry, I don't know what got into me there. That is, same costume he wore when he, crushed his brother's head in Freddy's mouth. Oh, I feel weird. Let's move on to the next one. Scooped. Once a normal-looking man, Michael Afton has become a purple, tinted husk of his former self. Right now, he's not hiding it like he usually does. So there's just gonna be, like street clothes, Michael Afton, all purple and gross-looking. I think this would be very neat just to have him looking really fucked up. I think it could be a very fun outfit for him to have, just, really showing off how messed up he looks. Nice, simple outfits. I am happy with them. Alright, last and certainly least, as you can tell by how little effort I put into this. I'm not a map designer. I just know that this is more or less what I'd expect. And here's the thing. I know that people don't want an indoor map. And I'll be honest, while I don't hate indoor maps as much as most people, I'm not a huge fan of them, but I've made enough fan-made licensed chapters that I've not shown the world that I can tell you right now, when it comes to licenses, potential licensed chapters, the maps for them, the options for really iconic locations tend to be indoors. It's just kind of the way it is, even if you don't want it to be. So this is probably an indoor map, okay? Anyway, my description of it. During the day, it's a place of joy, but you aren't here during the day. an entirely unique version of Freddy's Pizzeria, sized and designed to be perfect for the world of Dead by Daylight with plenty of Easter eggs to find. It would have a basement available on it and cameras that could be looked through by survivors or killers if they go to the security room. So not like something you interact with, just like there'd be camera monitors in the security room that you could see through the cameras around the map with. I think that'd be very fun. If you go in there, you can kind of get a look at things. And there should also be vents existing, so you can go between certain hallways and into the security room through them. Because vents are a useful thing. Doors should exist, be able to be dropped down as well, block off survivors or the killers, from each other. And I do think killers should be able to use these as well, give them an extra way to combat survivors and survivors an extra way to combat them. I think that'd be very interesting if both were able to use the vents and doors to get around the map and to block each other off. I think it'd be very, very fun. As far as vibes go, it should be run down, abandoned, grungy, altogether, just a nightmare. Like, one of the most disgusting maps ever, if not the most disgusting map ever. Rats running about, wallpaper peeling, pieces of the ceiling and floor missing or rotted away, the works. Okay, this should be Freddy's at its worst. Just disgusting. This should very much be run down, out of business, has been rotting for a decade minimum. Just an abomination. Like, barely able to see, the former beauty of it, but able to see it just enough that you feel the pain of loss. I think that would be the perfect kind of map for this chapter. And with that description, I must bid you adieu, because that's all I've got. I sincerely hope you enjoyed. I had a very fun time putting together this chapter, and I hope you can hear the enthusiasm in my voice as I talk about it. It's my first time doing a video like this. It probably won't be the last. Thank you all for watching, anybody who did, and I hope the FNAF chapter lives up to all of our expectations. Please, no axe trap. If he has an axe, that's fine, but why would he throw it and recall it? That makes no sense! I love you all. Mwah. Bye-bye.